Hey, good morning. It's Patrick Lovell, or good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I'm coming at you on Thursday, May 23rd, 2024 at approximately 10 a.m. my time. And hey, surprise to those of you who have been consistent viewers. This is my 496th Truth Bomb. I'm looking at myself, and I kind of remind myself of one of my favorite roles reprised by Woody Harrelson back in, I think it was 97 in Oliver Stone's classic Natural Born Killers. Otherwise, I'd like to call it, I refer to it as NBK. And I hate to refer to myself as Mickey, as in Mickey and Mallory, but yeah, you can see the new look here, right? And that irony is not lost on me, but I'm definitely not Mickey. But at the same time, I am somebody who I forgot to mention throughout this whole process. I've been going through chemotherapy for skin cancer, and fortunately for me, it wasn't, you know, super far into its, stages of metastasization, or that being in its sense that could, potentially in my life. We were able to get out in front of it, and I went through, chemo, and went through everything spectacularly. I didn't have really too many side effects. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how some people respond to somebody who's a skinhead, and I'm not that kind of skinhead. I'm the kind of guy that would take the skinheads bowling as a reprise to my late '80s, early '90s punk rock attitude. But yeah, I finished the cycle of chemo, and wouldn't you know it, I lost all my hair right after I finished. So I successfully completed my treatment, and then I lost all my hair. So it was actually kind of like Woody Harrelson also, and Bill Murray and Kingpin, where I had crazy strands of hair coming out of my head. So I just decided, to shave it, and we'll see how long that lasts. Apparently it's going to grow back. So hopefully it will. But for those of you new to this, hopefully millions of you are sharing this. I got to find a way. We've all got to find a way. I hate to say I told you so for those of you who have been paying attention for so long, but I've always said one of my go-to lines has been corruption burrs and fuels fascism. And yeah, if you just happen to open up your X feed this morning, and for the past couple of days, we've seen, what I would call like a TED offensive, if you will, of the MAGA universe that's been really facilitated by Elon Musk, Mr. Free Speech platform, disguised as a propaganda hit job where they completely amplify, you know, really insanity, and completely tamp down or throttle down, as Elon Musk has already revealed, those whose voices they don't particularly want to get out there. So, again, it's tech, right? And I've said, throughout many of these truth bombs before, which again, if you're new to these things, they are, kind of a part self therapy. That's how I started it to begin with, because I was in a real jam, because I was literally jammed by the system in a very similar situation where we revealed the most important series that you can find for free that we had to make available for free, because all the American people and the American system buy our lies. And you can find that at www.thecon.tv. But it led to further work that I did, because we basically were involved with a catch and kill. And I have reason to speculate and believe that BlackRock was on the other side of this. And maybe I'll have time to circle back to it in this truth bomb. But regardless, to say some of the elements that were on display or have been on display in this documents hush money trial fraud case against former President Donald Trump, of course, in the Eastern District of Manhattan. I always get it confused with the Southern District of Manhattan. But anyway, and the DA Alvin Bragg's case against Donald Trump, that also has all of the salacious stuff that has caught a lot of people's attention in mainstream media by way of Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen and everything else. But it's really about the fabrication of business documents, which are a felony, and then also another set of indictments based on election fraud, which to me, I think the prosecution has completely made its case. And then, of course, we've gotten into the weeds on, the credibility of Michael Cohen, who was a liar to begin with. And that's important to know, because liars who are CEOs look for liars to work for them for the types of things that Michael Cohen has displayed. The only thing that surprised me was Michael Cohen skimmed $30,000 from the Don, which I thought was a ballsy move and kind of really tells you more about Michael Cohen. But Michael Cohen was involved with all sorts of fraud and the medallion taxi cab stuff, and that was a big deal many years ago. But it's about the fabrication of business documents, which, if you know my work, you understand that I'm an expert in this. And if you look at the 91 indictments and all of the other trials, particularly the criminal trials that are not going to come to fruition, because now you can all see, and I see it all over X right now. And I reference X because I gave up on Facebook a long time ago because Facebook's algorithm throughout all of the Michigas and all of the controversy of 2016 and Russian bots and troll bots and all the stuff with the IRA, the Russian Prigozhin, attack, subordinate to KGB with all of its sorts of, initiatives, turned Facebook on its head. And now Facebook's algorithm is, again, what it's always been about. Hey, show me your dogs, show me how cool you are, show me your kids, show me how great your life is. Okay, that's great. I got away with that, got away from that because the stuff that I'm trying to tell you is what mainstream media oppressed, completely suppressed. And that's why I had to make the con to begin with. And so the idea that the federal government for the past, it's been on display for like the last 9 months, that Donald Trump has been under indictment for, and this is basically the catch-all of everything, defrauding the United States using deceptive acts and practices based on illegal documentation, engineering, and fraud to steal the election, and all of the things that we've seen in his business capacity in the civil fraud trial with Judge Edgeron and attorney, New York State Attorney General Letitia James. And then, of course, all of the stuff that's in the fabrication of business documents and the hush money trial. This is the pattern. These are the elements that the United States government has unsuccessfully, and there's probably a chance that there was like, an OJ moment where if the glove don't fit, you must acquit, with, Michael Cohen getting it wrong on the 14-year-old, crank call. And the whole thing reminds me of Mad Magazine. I post frequently on X the cover of Mad Magazine where it's like Donald Trump's head opens up and then, that character from Mad pops out. And that's the world we live in. And I comment on it all the time. But the reality of it is that the government is displaying what is illegal, that I spent many, many years in closing in on my 13th year of this insane odyssey that led me to ultimately having to go directly to the people to try to find a way to work through these algorithms, to connect with millions of people who have to understand the truth, because our entire society is collapsing right before our face. It is leading to gargantuan movements that have A, made our country unrecognizable, but B, are leading literally to just straight up fascism. For those of you who know me, you could probably repeat this because I say this all the time, but we're not a democracy and we're not a capitalist system. That's what my work reveals. And again, you can find it at www.thecon.tv. But that was the first aspect of the information that I had. I was going to make a season 2, but I couldn't get it funded because there wasn't a market for it, because we were catch and killed by the system. I have reason to believe that the world's most powerful and richest company, the asset manager BlackRock, basically did to us what was revealed in this hush money trial that David Pecker, and you can't make that name up, his whole purpose was with with Stormy Daniels to, pay hush money payments so that that information didn't come out at the same time that Donald Trump was in the midst of the grab him by the pussy revelation, to swing the election and everything that entails. But ultimately, we're talking about deception, cons, fabrication of business documents, people on the inside using the system, accountants and attorneys, and brokers and all manner, shape, or form of systems to be able to create massive, massive fraud. And that's what I revealed, because I knew the mainstream media in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis was pissing on my head, telling me it was rain, because they must have thought I was some kind of new fool, which I'm not. I know how things work, and I know I can figure out how things work if they don't make sense. And it didn't make sense. And everything that I've learned, I've been revealing to you, and again, warning you that corruption burns and fuels fascism. And so this is the crossroads, my friends. And the only way I'm going to get through and navigate to everybody that needs to hear this is you. You have to share me. You have to share the information that I'm providing. And in the description, I'm going to provide a link to the con. I'm going to provide a link to the new Untouchables, which was a podcast that I had to do to present another, I think it was 19 hours of information that I had intended for season 2 of the con that reveals more corruption, monumentally more corruption that closes the circle on the entire system, that completely failed the American people, that basically, and I got to segue into it this way, all over X this morning, we're seeing people respond in almost a crisis-like mindset that, oh my God, Judge Alito was flying a year ago or during the 2020 election or right around the insurrection, not just his house, but his beach house, upside down flags, which were assembled during the Civil War, from what I understand, and I believe it might have even been Union troops that were in distress. Maybe that was actually, throughout all of the wars, maybe the Indian Wars, who knows, right? But I know it wasn't a MAGA flag, but it was co-opted and ultimately hijacked, like a lot of things happen in this sort of situation, where a Supreme Court justice was flying the upside down flag, showing his camaraderie, if you will, his alignment, his support, his messaging to the insurrectionists that I'm one of you. And this is a Supreme Court justice. And we're now just learning about it. Okay. This is 4 years after the fact. Okay. And people are like losing their minds on top of all of the things that we've seen recently from Clarence Thomas. And of course, a lot of people, particularly women, have been rightfully disgusted and traumatized and in crisis based on Roe going back to the states because of the stacking the Republican court by the insane manipulation and brilliant tactician of one of the greatest diabolical betrayers of the United States in our history, Mitch McConnell, who, of course, we saw freeze up recently because of his age, and he's finally retiring because he's that old. He's been not, what's his name from the National Gun Association, the NRA Rifle Association? You say, not from my cold dead hands. That's what I think about power and Mitch McConnell and his Confederate-like, mindset, which is really another aspect of what I've been revealing to you this whole time, because we're not a democracy. We were hijacked by a takeover long ago, but that the death knell was thrown into our system following the 2008 crisis that I understood, but I had to get all the details, and I did in all my work. And again, in the description, I'll lay out, things that I put on X recently. The one thing that's been really working well for me on X are my articles. I've been seen by over 500,000 views. I don't know what the real analytics are on those, but I've laid out the case for what we have to do and how we have to do it, which I've always said I am trying to create, and I have to. We have to, because the fascism is here. Okay, it's arrived. And again, to try to complete the idea that we're not a democracy in our economic system, and it was news to me to recently consider that, yeah, capitalism is also considered a political system, not just an economic system. But it's not capitalist either, unless we want to completely redefine the definition of capitalism. The most important concept or construct of capitalism is risk reward. Yeah, capitalism is about money making money, but how? Well, therein lies what the con reveals. Theft is illegal. Lying is illegal, especially on business documents. Fabricating business documents is illegal. So as the entire federal government and state governments, circle the wagons on Trump, and effectively at the moment, while MAGA is gaining strength, as we can see that there is a complicit, corroborating aspect of MAGA in the courts that reach all the way to the Supreme Court. And of course, the corruption of the Supreme Court is unfreaking believable, considering billionaires like Harlan Crow, the Dallas billionaire real estate developer who's been paying Clarence Thomas, an African-American Supreme Court justice who only became one because of the fights of course, civil rights and everything that this country had to overcome through the Civil War and bondage and everything that we put down on paper, only to give a Supreme Court justice the power for an African-American to betray us by being paid by, ironically, and you can't make this stuff up because it's so diabolical, a white right-wing leaning supremacist, I suppose, who has a penchant for Nazi memorabilia, if that's the way you pronounce that. A little tongue-tied on that. I think he has an official signed copy of Mein Kampf, of all things. Yeah, he was paying Clarence Thomas directly to I believe, a house for his mother, and all of these, like this fantastic RV that, Clarence was traveling around the country trying to connect with the regular people, in style, of course. But of course, he was also on private jets, as was Alito. All of these are kind of upsides, and they would rule on scenarios that were important to these right-wing billionaires. And there's two significant undemocratic institutions in our country that are a part of this whole deal that I've revealed to you. And I want to close the loop on the fact that people are now suddenly paying attention to potential judicial corruption as it relates to the two justices that I mentioned. And that, how is Kavanaugh not completely like in our sights right now? I'm sure Kavanaugh's got all sorts of things, in his closet, aside from, the partying and the kegerator and all of the mishigas that he was involved with before he was named a Supreme Court justice. But we have 6 conservative Supreme Court justices and 3 liberal justices. And they're basically, again, pissing on your head, telling you it's rain, drawing out what should have been an easy decision that no president or former president is above the law, let alone one that was involved with the insurrection. And I say involved with the insurrection because Donald Trump would never be smart enough to architect and engineer the insurrection. Again, he's the cover of Mad Magazine. He's a joke. He's been a con for decades. He's a complete loser, which is hilarious that he is now, lifted up, I guess, all the losers of this country that find something in him that they can relate to, which is actually how fascism works. And fascism tends to be patriarchal. You're a specific color, you lean right, you look like a skinhead, and you're going to be able to control everybody else. Because LBJ said it best decades ago. He said, if you can convince the lowest rung white guy that he's higher than the highest rung black guy, you can pick his pockets all day. Yeah, that's the American version. It's called the Confederacy. It's called the plantation model. We were very good at it. Yeah, we had a split from the beginning of the revolution where through the compromise, we ultimately ended up with what, the 3/5 statute? Yeah, so we have been hypocritical from the very beginning, as has the notion of democracy, because of course what? We're the constitutional republic, which means what? Ruled by the minority, which means what? Gerrymandering and all sorts of manipulation that can create these scenarios that could create what I always call us a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate, which is what I reveal, which used the full faith and credit of the United States through socialism to provide tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the mafiocracy, which is now our financial system, which is now fueling fascism. That's what we are. And Patrick Lovell has all of the information as a conduit to the people that are the experts in the game that can turn this upside down, inside out, and right side up. If I have tens of millions of you join me, you now know that the media is corrupt. And by the way, what I've seen this past week is absolutely pathetic, okay? Particularly on MSNBC. Now, look, I've been out there on X particularly, proclaiming my appreciation for Lawrence O'Donnell. I think Lawrence O'Donnell is a genius. I would love to see Lawrence O'Donnell run for president, to be honest with you, regardless of what of his qualifications based on the big picture. But in terms of an actual leader and his wit and his his sort of strength and disposition, I think Lawrence O'Donnell's the man. But boy, do I wish Lawrence O'Donnell could go into the arena of what it is that I am endeavoring versus me standing on an island alone. But let's put Lawrence O'Donnell aside because he is as good as it gets at basically destroying Trump and MAGA every chance he's in front of the camera. He's magnificent. Absolutely love you, Lawrence. But the rest of mainstream media, particularly MSNBC, they're pathetic. And I'll include Rachel Maddow in that context because Rachel Maddow on Tuesday had gone Rachel Maddow Looney Tunes, which she does from time to time, as it relates to Fani Willis being on her own island and who's going to stand for law and protect Fani Willis, even though Fani Willis made a massive mistakes and should have extricated herself from the trial whenever there was a question of credibility regarding her relationship that just took eye off the ball because she's obviously involved with a very, very, very important case as it relates to RICO, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization in electioneering stealing involving Giuliani and the conspiracy to use documentation fraud to steal, of course, from the Electoral College using fake electors, which is insane. But the only reason that happened, quite frankly, again, is because Donald Trump made his bones through real estate fraud his entire career. Again, we saw documentation fraud being the reason he lost the civil fraud trial in New York. Again, how is it possible that Donald Trump tripled the square footage of his penthouse to get unlimited loans from Deutsche Bank? For me, it's kind of funny that I'm even asking that question, but none of the mainstream media ask themselves, hey, wouldn't Deutsche Bank do its due diligence and send one of their representatives to actually confirm all of the elements that were in the loan documents? Isn't it incumbent upon them to actually understand and do the due diligence through appraising to understand what the value of the house is? Isn't that the process? It's supposed to be. So why didn't they? And I'll just do a quick segue here. Mr. Matt Taibbi and Russiagate. Yeah, there was no here. Why? Because of the, and again, lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate because of the Steele dossier, because the Clintons were involved with the P tapes versus Putin being involved with Deutsche Bank and everything that happened with all of the fines and the money laundering. Where do you think that money was going to? It's unbelievably how stupid most of mainstream media is, including what were once the good guys. And I put Matt Taibbi in that category. In fact, I just dropped a truth bomb with William K. Black to address Matt Taibbi's most recent Substack article on MMT, which I think you'll find fascinating, which was the truth bomb that I did right before this. But getting back to the task at hand and the crisis that we're all in the midst of and everything else. So people understand now that, yes, the judiciary is corrupt. But what they don't understand, which I've shown over and over and over, particularly in the con, particularly in the new Untouchables, is that the documentation fraud that took place in liar's loans through entire pipeline of the housing industry, from origination to underwriting to appraisal fraud, all the way through the credit rating agencies, which is the entire system, created tens of millions of felonies using liar's loans on documents to blow up the world in what became from a $4.5 trillion housing bubble in 2006 and 7. And this stuff was going on since the late 90s, but it really blew up by the time we got to 2006 and 8. And that's part of the design, by the way, as it relates to what CEOs do with control fraud. You have to double the numbers, and they do this through what we call control fraud and Gresham's dynamic, to where everybody in the system knows what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to look the other way and lie and cheat and steal to get things approved, because that's what provides the bonus for everybody, particularly based on modern executive compensation. That's become our system through financialization, which comes off the heels of neoliberalism, which goes 4 decades of globalism. Okay, there's a lot to it. But ultimately, there were tens of millions of felonies that ultimately blew up tens of millions of Americans and then led to tens of millions of illegal foreclosures, because the same documentation fraud that was used in all of those liars' loans were used in at least 10 million foreclosures. The entire system had lost its mind. The registry of deeds, I've got evidence of hundreds of thousands of loan documents and fraudulent signatures that were, by the way, provided to the likes of Rachel Maddow and Matt Taibbi and the New York Times and the Boston Globe, all of which ignored it, given the fact that some of the CEOs of some of the largest banks of the United States lived within 30 minutes of where this registry was in Massachusetts. I was about to say Nantucket, but it can't remember the exact location. It might have been Nantucket, but anyway, I've got it on camera. It's in part of the the New Untouchables podcast that I have. In addition to the fact that in the aftermath of this incredible blowout, the Federal Reserve circled the wagons and created 98 secret meetings behind the scenes while the country was being sold a bill of goods that Congress, this dysfunctional Congress at that time, and it was dysfunctional, 13, 15 years ago, as it is now. It's actually worse now. But the long and the short of it is they put Humpty Dumpty back together again to save the rich. They put Humpty Dumpty together again to save the top 0.001%, and then mostly the top 10% benefited from it for the last 10 years. Because what we did was we put tens of trillions of dollars into the apparatuses, the too big to fail banks, the systemically important financial institutions. We gave them tens of trillions of dollars because we've got a fiat currency. We provided it to them illegally. Why? Because the way loans work, and anybody who's ever taken out a loan knows this, you have to have collateral. You have to have a job. You have to have the ability to pay back. It's called underwriting. The system has had, these mechanisms in place for probably centuries, let alone, since the 50s, when we pretty much perfected the system, when we created everything that had to take place to build the middle class after the Great Depression, after World War II, which was that generation's challenge to have to overcome, everything that was the opposite of what we were, to create what we're supposed to be, what we put down on paper, which Martin Luther King said, I just want you to live up true to what you put down on paper, which is liberty and justice for all, which is equality, which is the integrity of law, which is what we don't have, which is why I said we're corporate fascist system, yada, yada, yada. And now you're all seeing it. But the right, with this literally Tet offensive, okay, this has been in the playbook for these guys probably for decades. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I didn't really want to go into this as kind of a corollary, but now that I think about it, I should probably just mention it. As it relates to the war between Israel and Hamas, as it relates to all the tragedy and the insanity that's happened in Gaza, and there's really no good guys between all the extreme forces, obviously, that are at war, and there is a profit motive to war, let me tell you. But I'm absolutely convinced that Israel, and this was on the front page of the New York Times, they knew what Hamas was planning. And they gave them enough rope to be able to justify everything that's happened since. And that's part and parcel to a much broader calculus. That's what I think we did on 9/11, quite frankly. In fact, The Atlantic just came out with an article because the 9/11 families are suing, and some of this information is coming out again, but we've known it for a long time. The CIA and the FBI knew where the terror cells were. They knew how they were getting funded. They knew what they were training for, but they didn't put two and two together because they were prevented to by the powers that be for an outcome. What was that outcome? It was the last 23 years. But in terms of the financial system, all of these things were set up in this massive Ponzi scheme, liar's loan scenario, of which ultimately the remedy was when the entire system collapsed. And it collapsed from actually 4 decades of neoliberalism, where we killed the golden goose. We outsourced and offshored really all of the productive capacity of the United States, and we created a consumer class through credit. That's ultimately what we did. That blew up through liar's loans because it's not sustainable. That's why people and brokers were changing the terms on the loans to show that people had more money and more asset value to be able to get the loans so that they could turn over the loans, because they were getting paid to do so when they did that. And it led to these tens of millions of felonies that led to tens of millions of illegal foreclosures that led to millions upon millions of people. And it wasn't just in the housing industry. There were elderly people, particularly white working class, that had their pensions absolutely destroyed and crushed from Wall Street's financialization that tied all of the institutional investors through, a variety of pensions to basically buy the toxic product that Wall Street was creating through all this methodology that we show you. that Trump is a part of, that we've already seen that Trump was guilty of in New York, and the media didn't ask any of the right questions because the media is paid by the same system that blew up the world, that gave tens of trillions of dollars illegally to save the rich. And now you have all of these, cackling, chickens, as they feel to me, wandering around on the farm like Rachel Maddow and Alex Wagner and all of the rest of them, like, oh my God, the Supreme Court is corrupt. Oh my God, there's documentation fraud. Oh my God, look at the audacity of Trump. Oh my God, this guy's a criminal. Oh my God, somebody's above the law. Oh my God, we're on the verge of fascism. Yeah, we have been for years. And this is the end result. This is how it works. And I can tell you, I know a whole lot about Nazis and the Reich. And I am the ultimate anti-fascist. Not in a, rock slinging sort of, Palestinian the territories or anti, World Trade Organization in Seattle in the late 90s. No, I hate Nazis. Just like, my favorite film in the history of my lifetime, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones. I hate Nazis. And oh yeah, another corollary for that movie to encapsulate everything that we're talking about, one of the greatest moments in film history that encapsulates everything I'm talking about, was the moment when Indy and Sala were, getting the staff of Ra that had information on both sides that actually showed where the Ark of the Covenant was buried. Because what we're all been dealing with, based on media and what I'm talking about, MSNBC and all of the rest of them in mainstream media, say Fox, who's just, their entire business model is to lie, which Rupert Murdoch paid $787 million a year ago because of Tucker Carlson and all the rest, talking about all of the lies of the big lie of the so-called, the steal of the election, which was all predicated on what happens, and I'll use another metaphor from, mainstream, or I should say from, the cultural, what am I talking about? Just from Game of Thrones, ultimately, when Jon Snow figured out when people, all they do is lie, all you do is get better and better lives, no remedy. That's what we're in the midst of. And going back to Indiana Jones, they were looking in the wrong place. If you don't have all of the information, you're looking in the wrong place. I've got all of the information. I need you to discover it. I need you to wrap your head around it. It's all in the descriptions down below. I need you to reach out to me and ask me, but more importantly, I need you to share me, because see, I have been literally, have you ever seen World War Z? You remember all the zombies that, basically are trying to take over everything, and, what it looks like when gazillions of them are together, and that's what's happening to me on X with sex bots. Every time I land the seed, plant the seed and I provide truth, it's not getting out there because it's being suppressed. Just like BlackRock suppressed the coin after we released it 3 years ago, which forced me to go into doing these truth bombs to try to get to the truth to the tens of millions of people that are going to do it. So what am I trying to get you to do other than understand the truth of everything that I've laid out and share the truth because of everything I'm telling you, how social media works? But we've got to actually rise to the moment, and we've got to be as invigorated and active as we're seeing in the Bronx today, based on the dumbest MAGA zombie apocalypse in history that's going to to upswell a liar who's a rapist and a treasonous bastard who was selling documents, to our enemies down in Mar-a-Lago that might be nuclear secrets to, for example, Saudi Arabia, who was very involved with 9/11. Are you kidding me? No, we've got to rise to the moment. Tens of millions of us have got to rise above the lies of media, because here's the thing. Look, what are our three choices right now? You got President Biden, who, if I had to vote today, unfortunately, I would. I'd hold my nose and I'd be like, yeah, you know what? We can't have Trump. Trump is the end of the world, quite frankly. But what about RFK, Bobby Kennedy Jr., as they call him? I've read all of his policy descriptions on the back, and all of them, most of them, outside of his immigration policy, which is twisted and weird, just like a lot of what he displays to me because of just his mindset of talking out of both sides of his mouth and not coming to a resolution. And that could go into another truth bomb about that. And I have challenged all the RFK supporters to come talk to me so we can get to the bottom of it, because I do want to resurrect the middle class, and I do want to get rid of corporate capture, because that's what it's all about. But Kennedy doesn't know how it works. The ultimate irony is that Kennedy is supposed to be this expert on all things CIA. He came out swinging that they murdered his uncle, and I was all for that because, yeah, there's still remaining insane questions that would make a whole lot of the last 70 years make sense if we understood that is actually what happened, which I think it did. And there's more to it than that. But, ultimately, Kennedy doesn't realize what Sullivan and Cromwell's role was in what I'm talking about, which basically in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, it was Raj Cohen, the general partner was he general counsel? He's definitely the general partner of Sullivan Cromwell, revealed to the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission that, yeah, they had to expand the credit box of Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which gives the United States its lender of last resort capacity to save the criminals without the racketeering indictments that should have come from the Department of Justice. That's the con. We gave tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the guys that destroyed the world. And that's what they've created as a result, because they got to hide their crimes, which Patrick Lovell is revealing, which has created MAGA. So we got a two-front war. You got to fight corruption and you got to fight fascism. And the only way we can do that is tens of millions of us with the truth of how it works to come together to create a tidal wave populist crusade to purge corruption and drown or I like to say water cannon the fascism that it fuels. How are we going to do that? What is the Clean New Deal? Well, just briefly, it's to create a new Pecora-like hearing, which is what I've been doing the whole time. And if you understand my work, you'll understand who Ferdinand Pecora was. Too much to go into right now because I want to finish this up. But we've got to be able to demonstrate to the American people who did what, when, and how, what they got away with. And the CEOs of Wall Street have got to be held accountable. And all of the money that they've looted and stolen has to be clawed back. We've got to take over the banks, and we've got to clean up the mess of this incredible system. And there's more. And by the way, for you junkies out there for Epstein, yeah, it's tied to Epstein. That's a part of it. Okay. And laundering money for drug cartels and sex traffickers and terrorism organizations. Yeah, they all funnel their money into the United States by way guys like Trump that actually their business model depends on. Why wouldn't he want to be president of the United States? Do you know what Jared Kushner and Steve Mnuchin are involved with Saudi Arabia, for example? Oh my God, it just doesn't end. But the Clean New Deal is modern day Pecora investigation in Congress with all of the people that need to understand all of the elements of what we reveal in the con. And I've got all the right guys that know how to do that, that came out of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the AGs, if only millions of you understood it, okay? Then we got to create we got to get rid of we got to create a new Glass-Steagall, which were all of the regulations that we learned after the Great Depression because of Ferdinand Pecora that basically separated commercial banking from investment banking so that these con artists can't basically gamble with other people's money. That's what our system is. And that's what leads to this whole thing. The opposite side of that is to get rid of Citizens United. You've got to get rid of legalized corruption. And by the way, just to show you how dumb Donald Trump is, the guy makes hush money payments directly, through his fixer, when all he had to do was work with one of his goons because of what the entirety of God, my mind is swimming with so many different things. Funny, I got through this and I'm not going to have to re-record it. I'm just going to Citizens United. Geez, wow, that's what happens when your mind's flooded. All he had to do was work with LLCs and nonprofits to basically make those payments, and nobody would have been the wiser. That's how stupid Donald Trump is. And that millions of stupid people, which are the zombie apocalypse, are rising to Donald Trump now. But is that any different to what happened in Mussolini's Italy? Is that any different than what happened in Germany's, Nazi movement? No, this is how fascism works. And I stand for liberty and justice for all, and equality and the integrity of law. And the only way you can get there is if tens of millions of people rise behind the truth to elevate it to where we put our foot down and we create a government of, by, and for the people. Does it sound like a hard job? It's not. All you have to do is wrap your head around it. I've already done all the hard work, and we made it for free because, again, all of the American people buy our lives. There's so much to do. There's not enough time to do it. They're all digging in the wrong place. The truth is our savior. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. Rise, roar, revolt. Failure is not an option, my friends, right? This is the righteous grind. Please hashtag Patrick Lovell. Please hashtag the $71 trillion truth. Please spread this like our life depends on it. And by the way, when you have $71 trillion, okay, as a starting point, because I've demonstrated that on the low end, that a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the American people have looted $71 trillion for themselves. You ever wonder why we have the problems with equality that we do? Is it because these guys that are the top 0.00% are just so much smarter and have created so many wonderful things that everybody's consuming from them? And so therefore the winners take all? No, it's because of monopolies. It's because of deception. It's because of control. And one thing I will finish off with this is this, and I've made this recommendation before, but this is just our turn to fight this fight. We've got to fight this fight. And Americans have done this throughout our entire history. That's what the American Revolution was. That's what the Civil War was. That's what the Civil Rights Movement was. That's what the war on fascism was. That's what all of the progressive movements from trust busting into the New Deal war. This is what we do. And that's why this is the clean New Deal. And yeah, I do know about the genocide of North American Indians. I know about the Mexican-American War. I know about, really basically expansionist, what do we call it back in the day? Manifest Destiny and all the rest of it. Yeah, I know who the United States is. And you want to call it a settler colonial state? Yeah, then predicated on separation of powers. Yeah, there's a lot of contradictions. Okay, so you got to get on the right side of history here. And this is the right side of history, because a government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. Because what the Clean New Deal is all predicated upon doing is getting a flash mob of millions of us in Washington, D.C. to join me, to where I present all of these truths to the American people. And then we surround SCOTUS, and then we surround the Congress, and then we surround the DOJ. Not like J6, but where we get, we peaceably assemble, but we elevate the truth to where they can't ignore it. And then everybody knows it. And then we can basically put this in front of the election and have all of the guys that are running for president that are making sure that you don't know this in the media, to make sure you don't know this, can't ignore it. Because Biden is of, by, and for BlackRock, okay? That's why BlackRock had to suppress the information, because they were the guys that were put into pole position to manifest the rebuild after the 2008 great financial crisis. And that's how they became the biggest company in the world, because they're basically the United States, but a financial side working for the tiny few. That's not the United States. The United States is liberty and justice for all, predicated that no man is above the law, because of the integrity of law and separation of powers, of course, which we don't have. As you can see, the corruption in the courts, as you can see the corruption in the media, as you can see the corruption everywhere, and it's all collapsing around us. You got to wrap your head around, I'm telling you, and you've got to be able to press this forward. And that's the only way it's going to be able to get through this, incredible Borg of deception. It is, the Matrix, among other things. It's all of the good guy stories we've ever seen. And it's not about Patrick Lovell. I'm just the deliverer, getting us to Exodus from corruption to create the resurrection of the American dream. And that's what this is all about, is to redeem the dream. We've got to stand at the Washington Mall, just like, Martin Luther King, underneath the gaze of Abraham Lincoln, who said, a government of and for the people shall not perish from this earth. This is our time to prove it for our generation. There's no time to lose. Failure is not an option. Onwards and upwards.